Winning by a landslide. Never see me coming, I'm a landmine. Yeah, I ain't taking orders in command like. Yeah, you about to see me on demand like. You know on demand. If you ain't know, you about to understand. Yeah, I got the team by my side, right hand. Yeah, take it to a string.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Mondays Down South. Evan's giving me some side-eye because my interests kind of attack a different angle here. But regardless, good to be back. I've been slacking off again. Promised in 2022 I would do a better job, attending these podcasts. But here I am, ready to rock and roll. And what an important podcast, because we just saw the conference championships in the NFL games. So the AFC game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Kansas City Chiefs. Crazy game in Arrowhead Stadium, caught many of us by surprise. And then later in the evening, obviously the Rams and 49ers playing for the third time. Obviously the Rams sneaking this one out in SoFi Stadium. But guys, it's good to be back. Figured we'd talk some sports. And, obviously we've got a couple of things going on, NBA trade deadline. Obviously the MLB is pretty interlocked right now between the owners and the players. So curious to see where that goes. But overall, great weekend of the NFL. Sai, Ev, what are your initial thoughts on some of the games, and what do you guys want to jump into?
I feel like we can save NFL till the end if you have any thoughts on NBA or MLB, Ev, because I know you mentioned NBA briefly. Any trades you're excited about? I know the trade deadline's coming up. We haven't talked about NBA, but I feel like it's probably a good time to get into that, since I feel like the season's been going. It's been fun. It's not really as cut and dry as previous years in the sense of, you always have the LeBrons on one coast, and then you have one other team on another. And it seems like we've had kind of a change of the guard over the last couple of years. So, I mean, the Nets are sixth in the East, and they were first in the East like a week ago. So that the Eastern Conference is crazy. The top six teams are all projected to win like 50 games or more, which we haven't seen since like, I don't know, the 80s or something. And then the West is pretty wide open, and the Suns are in first place, but I feel like anyone could really win on that. And so it's a fun season, a lot of parity, especially with injuries and such. So
yeah, it's good to see the East kind of bring it back a little bit. I mean, the depth in that conference, as well as like good teams at the top, is pretty strong. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. I think the Sixers are white hot right now. And to see what they do at the trade deadline. Obviously the biggest name that could move is Bradley Beal. And based on how awful the Wizards have been lately, I actually think there's a decent chance that they actually move him, which obviously you think Sixers, maybe Ben Simmons coming the other way back to DC. So if the Sixers could do something like that, they put themselves right back at the top of the mix. And Golden State also out west, now that Klay is back. He really showed out in that Nets game the other night. I don't know if you watched that one, but a really good back and forth one. Klay hits a big shots down the stretch. So the Warriors are back. But yeah, it's been fun. I think trade deadline biggest names, obviously, if Beal ends up moving. And then Jeremy Grant is probably the biggest name that will actually move if he does. And then Sabonis is out there as well. Harrison Barnes could help someone. You got some names like that. So I don't know if we'll have any big names. I think Beal would be the biggest if they decide to move him. But yeah, always interesting to see how the power dynamic shifts a little bit and see what happens.
It reminds me of the bet that, well, it wasn't a bet, but it was more of a bold statement that Evan had made at the beginning of the NBA season when he said the Wizards are going to be better than the Lakers. And honestly, he wasn't far off
even.
for the first, 30, 40 games of the season. So I don't know what's been going on with the Wizards. They got to start eating their Wheaties again for breakfast. They kind of the wheels of the bus are starting to fall off. But the Lakers, I think, are right now the 8th or 9th place in the West, right? So they're still within contention, I guess. I think the Wizards have kind of slipped out of 8.
Yeah, the depth in the East, but the records are pretty similar. I think the Lakers are a game or two better. But yeah, the Lakers are just awful, dude. I mean, LeBron is having an incredible season, but Russell Westbrook is just an absolute joke. And the rest of the squad is it's not it, dude. I don't care how well LeBron plays. They don't have a chance at all this year, in my opinion.
Kuna, are there any bet contingencies with the person I think from South Carolina that you made a bet with in regards to Russell Westbrook never winning a championship, knowing that he's getting a little bit older and knowing that he's kind of pairing up with these superstars to hopefully just get one? Are there at least any stipulations in this contract you guys have to shield you from having to pay him? Because there's no way he's going to win it on his own, or even with one superstar.
No. So the bet was actually with Manhas, or as you like to call Muskan, because he's a Westbrook fan, and I am the opposite of a Westbrook fan. I mean that with no disrespect to him, because I do think he's one of the most epic players in the sense of what he brought with his triple doubles and all that. But I just don't think he's like a champion with the way that he plays basketball, because I feel like every superstar he's ever played with, the team's gotten worse. I mean, the Lakers are a perfect example. I'm not putting all the blame on Russell Westbrook. I think there's been injuries. Anthony Davis is underwhelmed this season. LeBron's been hurt. But like Westbrook, for example, last year on the Lakers or the Wizards, the first half of the season he struggled. The second half of the season he balled. And I won't take that away from him. He had an amazing like season statistically. But like the Wizards didn't really do much with it. I mean, they made the playoffs and I think lost in the first round. So that's the thing, right? Like everywhere Westbrook goes, like they don't win. I mean, he goes to the Rockets. The Rockets didn't really get that much better. He had some decent stats, but then he struggled in the playoffs. Like that's just my perspective of Westbrook holistically. I always said to myself though, the only situation I'm concerned with is if he ever ends up on a team with LeBron when he's like older. And of course that's what happened. And, you know, obviously it's hard to think the Lakers would win this year, but I'm personally not ruling them out because I just think there's another gear for them to be able to activate. I mean, AD's played nowhere near his potential. We already know what he's capable of. And obviously LeBron, when he turns it on, is still one of the best, if not the best player in the league. So they've been inconsistent. Obviously Westbrook has been more of a detriment in the first half than he has been a plus after the trade and everything. But I personally think that, like, if they can turn it on for the last 25% of the season and they're hot going into the playoffs, they can beat anybody if they're healthy. But that's a lot of ifs, right? Because they have to get healthy.
Down the stretch. Another bad beat that we haven't talked about on this podcast, to my knowledge, is, you know, obviously Ev's wearing his Washington football team jersey. As of tomorrow, there will be the release for the new name. And for the audience that's listening, I'm not sure if you guys were able to tune into the debacle of the video being leaked on the Washington football team website that actually showed the name, and which we won't give away. Oh, I guess it was like the Commanders, right? That's the name that was shown on the video. And then they quickly took the video down. It was supposed to be like this marketing hype video to get everybody really, really excited about the February 2nd name drop. And so they posted it, and then somebody just like stopped the video at like 1 minute and 11 seconds. It's like a 3-minute video. And they were like, well, it says Commanders on this like little form like that this coach was holding. And, you know, information like quickly leaked on Twitter. They very quickly removed the video from their site. And then Washington spokespeople had the audacity to come out and say, we might be tricking you. We might not be. Stay tuned for February 2nd. And like the most consistent response was, I've been a Washington football team or like a Washington football fan for a long time. If you actually think that they could pull off some sort of fake like this, you don't know this organization. Like, you know, that's the name, in my opinion. I think it's going to be the Washington Commanders. But Ev, curious to see your thoughts and some of the other options that we're looking at. I think there's like 5 or 6 they've narrowed it down to.
Yeah, I had to rep the jersey with as the end of an era here, but it's also Pro Bowl week. So shout out John Allen, former classmate, friend of the show. John, if you ever want to come on, man, we'd love to have you. But starting in the Pro Bowl this weekend as well, so that's cool for him. But they did say before, like well before that they were going to throw out like a bunch of red herrings. So like for them to come up and say that like wasn't a surprise because they've done it with some of the other names too. I do think of all the red herrings they've thrown out there, that one seemed like a slip up because in the Twitter video, they had blurred out those papers. And then, like you said, on the website, when they sent it to like another source to stream it out, like they weren't blurred out. Now, granted, that still could have been like you saw the top paper, but that still could have been like a slide deck, for example, of all the different logos. Like you don't know, but it seemed all along that Commanders was the name. I think the funnier one is, do you see Joe Theismann either yesterday or the day before, like go on a radio show and like basically say that the name is Commanders? He was like, yeah, I think that I hope the fans respond well to the name being Commanders or something. He like literally came out and say it. I was like, okay. But it does seem like that's the name. It seemed like that was going to be it all along. I'm kind of the popular options. I think Admirals is the other one that had some steam there at the end. That I prefer that, I think, but the one I wanted was Red Wolves, which is according to the team they couldn't get the copyrights for. So whatever. Commanders is meh. It's like very boring, but whatever. I support the military theme, but I just want it to be over and move on to getting a quarterback realistically and hopefully winning some football games this year.
I don't care what your name is. I'm just glad nobody has to call you the football team anymore because I
like the football team.
No,
the football team.
I know you liked it because you
liked it.
Yeah, of course the fans liked it because it makes you guys seem like you're relevant. But then for the rest of the league, it's like you don't get to be the football team. Like that makes it seem like you are the football team, which you're clearly not the premier football team in the NFL.
Or the Washington football team.
Yeah, but people would say the football team, and I was like, it's driving me crazy. Like I was so tired of that. So I'm very excited for that name to be changed because nobody should be able to get the title. You know, I know it's the Washington football team, but in short being the football team, I'm done with that. So I'm excited for you guys to be anything else. But yeah, I was hoping for the Red Wolves. I thought that was like a really cool, and I thought the mascot would be dope and like the uniforms would be dope. But you know, we'll see. The Commander seems like a very safe option, but maybe safe was the right thing to do after their previous name. So I don't necessarily fault them in that sense.
That's the thing about team names. It's like once it's over, it just like becomes a part of reality. You don't really think about it. Like for all of us that like grew up watching a team, it's like the name was obviously created like well before we were even born in many cases. So it just like was the name. You never really thought about like, oh, I hate our team's name. You know what I mean? So
dude, my favorite team's name is a Colt. It's a literal like thing you throw on a peg or like something.
Yeah, it's like,
come on, it's not like epic, but we embrace it, right? Like eventually, it becomes commonplace.
It just is.
Yeah, realistically, you had to get away from Washington football team, Ev, because you know WFT and WTF, you know, are pretty synonymous, especially with the debauchery of the season towards the end, with the losing streak and whatnot. But I was actually kind of hoping for something that was like pigskin or like something like football related, but then I looked at that and it would have been HTTP, which is pretty much the start of a website. So I figured, you know, it's probably safe to get away from any of those names. Unfortunately, the ATT or the HTTR will, you know, most likely be ruined there. I think Red Wolves or Red Hogs or something like that maybe would have continued it, but I think overall, I'm not sure if the colors will change. Some people I heard, they said that they're entertaining that idea of going.
So the colors are basically the same. They're getting new uniforms though, and the uniforms actually they sent little snippets. They actually looked really good. So I'm hoping those come out tomorrow as well. And they are adding black back in, so they have a black alternate helmet. It looks like, which should be pretty sick. So the uniforms are kind of the big thing, I think, because like that's what people actually are like, you know, kind of respond to. I feel like so. There are going to be like slight differences, but you know, with the same basic color scheme, but so that'll be interesting. But yeah, it's just good.
Logo, change the name, but do not change the uniform or like the colors of a uniform. Colors of the team. That's a terrible idea because like every team is synonymous with their respective colors, right? Like that's what you think of when you think like if I say the Seahawks, you know, the first thing you're not thinking of is logos or anything. You're thinking of their colors, right? Like that's the last thing you want to say. Like Colts are a blue team, you know, like when you see a field and you see players in an away and road jersey. That's not what you want to change because that's just it's the first thing your eyes see, right? So I'm so against changing colors. Like maybe little modifications is fine, but actually changing the base two colors of a team is just, I think, a really bad idea.
Yeah. So I think the full package will be fine. I mean, they were really thorough with it. So, and I actually like our president, as messed up as our organization is as a whole. Like I actually really like our president. So I think he does a good job. So we'll see. I'm just looking forward to being over.
The day after the unveiling is the day that Congress starts to investigate the whole Washington football team incident with cheerleaders and the email surveillance and all of that. So good luck, Dan Snyder. There's no way he's a part of the crew in 2022.
Yeah, what timing of that? no coincidence there. I'm sure.
It's the very next day. But maybe we can jump into the games here. Sai, we'll kick it over to you. First of all, what were you doing for the games? Were you like in the DC area? I know you've been traveling a good amount. What were you doing for the games? Like just hanging out, social house, watching the Bengals and Chiefs, or what were you up to?
I actually caught the game with the second game with Mr. Patrick Barnett. The first one I was watching at my buddy's place in Arlington, Kenny, but the second half I caught up with Patrick and Mr. B because they were in town and we went out to the Archer Hotel that recently opened up in Tyson's. Shout out to them, a big spot for me and the company peeps. So we go over there and we watch a game and then we moved on over to Patsy's and caught the second half there and had a great time, man. We had all kinds of bets going. I messaged in the group and it looked like Evan had the same bet, but in the second game, I did pick the Rams to cover, which obviously didn't happen, but I also picked a parlay with Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel to both score a touchdown, and then for Matt Stafford to throw for over 250 yards. All those seemed very plausible, so I went for it, and it looks like Ev did too, and that was a nice payout. So that was a fun one. But before I jump into that, I watched it in DC area. If you guys want to speak to where you guys watched it, please, by all means, do that because I don't want to get into game analysis before we get over the overarching stuff. So I see you were in Austin, so I'll let you guys jump in.
I was on a plane. I missed the last game, but I did catch the
Wow.
early part of the first game. What about you?
So I actually have breaking news here. I got a text. There's literally a Commanders logo like on the inside of FedEx Field right now. So I'm pretty sure it's done. There's like there's like aerial footage from like a helicopter or something that my buddies just sent me that literally says Commanders on the inside. So I think we have our answer. This was this one's not a fake out. So there you go. Anyway.
Oh no, there's already jokes too. Bruce just texted me and he said the Washington commies. I was like, no, Bruce. No.
I saw that. Yeah. Hail to the commies. Hail to the commies.
Oh boy.
Anyway, but I actually was watching the Chiefs Bengals game with our boy Muskan, who gets his second shout out of the episode. But and then just watched the Rams Niners from home. I wasn't too into that one to be honest with you.
Oh, I didn't know you and Manas were hanging out for the game. Who'd you guys go?
Just one of the sports bars in Midtown.
Both you guys were just interested in the game, so went out to a little spot.
Yeah. I guess he was looking to watch them. So yeah,
that's sick, man.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, so I had that same sports bet. Pat McAfee was white hot this weekend. So made some decent coin on a couple parlays. But yeah, that Chiefs Bengals game, I mean, who knew the Bengals were going to be able to get it done here? I mean, Joe Burrow down the stretch there using his legs and not just his arm. Not the biggest game for Chase, but he made big plays in the second half and got a touchdown. And then really, I think the story is the Bengals defense, like that play at the end of the first half. Really gave them some momentum and arguably saved them from getting blown out of the building there. And then the defense stood up and held Patrick Mahomes down and Hill and Kelsey. And I mean, held them to just like 3 points or something in the second half. Right. And then they were able to get it done in overtime despite losing the coin toss. So shout out Joey B, Evan McPherson, another game winner. This is the formula for the Bengals. It looks like.
Go ahead, Zico.
Well, just I guess piggybacking off of that, Joe Burrow, man, it's getting a little chilly in here. I'm not gonna lie. This dude has put the team on his back, game over game. The whole team rallies around him. I cannot believe that I picked Dak over this kid a couple weeks ago. In terms of MVP voting, despite the fact that they were close. I mean, Joey B is killing it right now. And I saw an interesting stat. It stated something like, it was like it showed the date that he had put in the request for the transfer to LSU. And then that very next year won a national championship. And here he is just a couple years later, playing for a Super Bowl with a lot of his, similar teammates. So shout out to him. Shout out to the defense. Von Bell, very underrated safety, playing great football. That huge interception to end it late. Even people like Eli Apple are kind of stepping up, very unlikable corners, having kind of a resurgence of their career. And then ultimately, Joe Mixon just running that football. I mean, I love his style. He's like the perfect mesh of power and speed, in my opinion. Like, he's very balanced, and he's been instrumental for that offense and setting up the play action, allowing guys like T. Higgins to eat, Jamar Chase to eat, et cetera. So I thought this Cinderella story was going to die, a couple weeks ago, but here they are. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I saw Tyreek get his touchdown. I saw Travis Kelce get his touchdown early. It's like 14-3, then 21-3. I was like, uh-oh, this is going to get really ugly in Arrowhead. Somehow, some way, they came back, and all props to them. But yeah, Si, what do you think? What was your synopsis from the game?
The toughest thing for Sunday for me with in that state was at halftime. I think there was a Super Bowl odds for a bet on each of the teams on what their payouts would be if you picked them at that moment to win the Super Bowl holistically. And the Bengals was I think I don't know if I'm getting a zero wrong here, but I think it was plus 7,000 or something, because they were down by double digits to the Chiefs and the rest of the game was to go. So they'd have to come back, win that game, and then go to the Super Bowl and win. And I was this close to just putting $5 down, because I was like, all right, worst comes to worst, I lose $5. But if some epic comeback happens, then this could be $700 or something, right? This close. And I was like, screw it. I'll put it on something else. And I didn't do it. But man, I'm so bummed I didn't. I'm not saying I think the Bengals are going to the Super Bowl, but they definitely got a clear shot based off what we've seen. But I'm so just absolutely impressed with what the team was able to do in the second half. I also want to call the Chiefs out a little bit, because they had that game locked up and they really blew it. it's, I feel like nowadays in the modern NFL with these explosive offenses and with the game being so geared towards like, getting all these offensive geniuses and stuff like that, it seems like the one thing they can't seem to learn is how to hold on to leads, bro. Like this keeps happening in games where the best offensive minds seem to struggle so much to get this big lead and then be able to keep the lead, because I think, they're so used to coaching to put up a ton of points that when they have a ton of points, maybe they adjust their game plan too much and they really struggle to keep that margin, and they really struggle when the other team just sticks to their game plan and you change yours, and then they start making their positives happen, you start making your negatives happen. Still, the Chiefs had so many opportunities to finish that game off, and I think they missed on a lot of them, and I think the Bengals took advantage of it. But Zach Taylor, man, like we're going to talk about all the highlight offensive players and the effort the defense did, but it's weird because even in the media and everything like that, I feel like Zach Taylor has gotten very little conversational topic. And that's something that we talked about last week. Like he deserves by far coach of the year at this point with what they've done. And I know they don't usually include playoffs, but even to have them make the playoffs out of that division and be the representative, like it's a lot of that hinders on him because he's stuck to what he knows, and he has not like faded from his guys, and he trusts his guys and he puts them in a position to win. And I think that's where guys like Burrow and McPherson early in their careers have so much confidence. So I give them a lot of credit. I want to say two more quick things because I want to give Ev his moment, but McPherson as a first year kicker, unbelievable. Like just he's got so much guts to just like it seems like he's Vinatieri out there, like right, like it's like he's just not going to miss when you need him to make a kick. It is how it feels as a rookie, and that's crazy. And then Joe Burrow, first quarterback in NFL history to be a number one overall pick and make a Super Bowl in his first 2 seasons playing. And who knows how good they would have been his rookie year if he hadn't gotten hurt. So that's huge. And I love that you brought up the transfer from Ohio State to LSU, because I posted in our group meet chat that we have, and apparently Ohio State fans are claiming Joe Burrow as their own because he's the first Ohio State quarterback to make a Super Bowl. And Joe Burrow comes out and he goes, I don't know who these people think they are. I'm an LSU guy through and through. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. And it was one of my favorite statements ever, because I was like, that is absurd for Ohio State people to be like, oh, that's our, first Ohio State quarterback to make a Super Bowl. No. Don't start with me here, bro. So that was so good on Burrow's part. So I'm going to kick it over to Ev.
I'm glad, Zach, you mentioned Mixon too, because Mixon in this game specifically, I feel like it was a really stabilizing factor for them. Like in the first half, I feel like the only way they were moving the ball was on the ground with Mixon. They still didn't put up many points, but at least got them to move the ball, like got their defense off the field, and sustain some drives. And in the second drive, he just kept it up. And then T. Higgins as well, because they were covering up Jamar Chase pretty well. So, tough break losing Uzama as well. Although it sounds like he's going to try and play, which I don't think is going to happen in the Super Bowl. But they just got it done. I mean, it wasn't their most explosive game offensively. Chiefs did pretty well on defense for the majority of the game, especially the first half. But they just keep finding ways to win, and they don't really care what people think, and they're just going to keep balling.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite meme that I saw was not anything related to like Jackson Mahomes, like, oh, thank God he's not going to have to dance at the Super Bowl because Joe Burrow took care of business. It was actually like Kevin McAllister memes from like Home Alone and whatnot in New York. It's like, this is Kevin McAllister grown up, and like, Joey Burrow's just balling out. So I thought those were pretty good too.
Bauhaus and I were talking about that. I hadn't realized that before, how much Joe Burrow looks like Macaulay Culkin. And have you seen him grown up too? It's like literally like they look the exact same. But dude, the people on Twitter shredding Jackson Mahomes and Pat's wife, that was hilarious. Like I was eating that stuff up. Like all the TikToks of like people crying but still dancing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just pure comedy. But honestly, Pat did not play well in the second half at all. And like, I mean, he threw the pick in overtime, but the play before he also basically threw a pick and they dropped it. So really, really struggled on his end. Not his usual like primetime performance, especially in the AFC Championship. But
isn't it kind of crazy to think how much of a dynasty we're seeing here with the Chiefs though? Like even though the Bengals made it to the Super Bowl, they had to scratch and claw to win that game, and I give them so much credit for that. But at the same time, the Chiefs have now made the AFC Championship games 3 years in a row, and they made the Super Bowl 2 out of 3, and they almost made the Super Bowl again with almost the size of lead up front, and then the Bengals came back. So It's like, I mean, they might run into cap problems and stuff later on, but Patrick Mahomes, man, even with the struggle, like it's crazy to see how good the Chiefs are potentially going to be for the next 5 to 7 years. This is why people like Burrow need to take advantage of these opportunities when they get them, because getting through that team is going to be so difficult for people year after year after year, because even the Bengals, they're young, right? Like they can improve, but do I think that they're going to be able to establish the level of dynasty that a team like the Chiefs have already established this early in Mahomes' career? I don't think so, because I think the one thing with the Bengals is like they're going to have so much offensive players to put their money towards the way the Chiefs did, but the Chiefs almost have like that veteran presence that they've already pre-established. So it's just crazy to think. It's almost like the Bengals are the Chiefs light, right? Like they're essentially trying to do what the Chiefs did by having such a powerhouse offense and trying to piece together a defense to kind of win on the other end. And it's just such an interesting dichotomy to me. So
I think we should be careful calling them a dynasty though, because it's one Super Bowl in 4 years. Obviously that's 2 championship game appearances if you count the one before where Tom got them. And like, especially the other thing we didn't talk about, obviously Brady formally announced his retirement today. Let's be careful calling them a dynasty and we'll see what happens. Like the best way to win in the NFL is obviously to find a quarterback still on his rookie deal that is, a top 5, top 10 guy. And then you can build the rest of the team around him while the quarterback's cheap. And obviously, when Mahomes' contract is going to kick up here, we'll see what they're able to do from a cap perspective. So I'd be careful.
I actually kind of lean Sai's direction there. I would go dynasty for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it actually reminds me, I think Sai had alluded to it pretty well. And I know you guys have touched on this in the previous podcast with the divisional round. But what we're seeing is out with the old, in with the new. So we're seeing guys like Phillip Rivers, Brady, Big Ben, like a lot of these old quarterbacks who have really been like staple in the NFL for a long time with their teams leaving. But you're seeing these new quarterbacks really come into fruition for a long time, right? Like, for example, you're going to see, just like Brady and Manning always duked it out in the AFC Championship game, Colts and Patriots. I think you are going to see that with 2 dynasty teams in the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills and Allen and Mahomes. I think that is, the start of these new dynasties here that you will see in those positions year over year. I think the Bills are not going anywhere, and I don't think the Chiefs are either. So I actually would consider them dynasties.
Well, I want to say one thing. First of all, I think we got to give the Bengals more credit because they clearly just made the Super Bowl.
I was going to say, they just made the Super Bowl and you're already disrespecting them, saying that they're not on that same level.
No, and they're still young, and Joe Burrow's on his rookie deal, like Evan said, so they'll have the money to pay other players in the meanwhile. And honestly, they could probably add on the defensive front if they needed to with the way that they can move money around. So I'm not pretending like the Bengals can't beat them, but I'm more talking about how the Bills and the Bengals threw everything they had in the kitchen sink at the Chiefs, and the Chiefs probably should have won the Bengals game. Like they clearly had the lead. And as much as I give the Bengals credit for fighting back and clawing back and winning that game, like, let's be honest, the Chiefs were probably the better team and they had the lead and they just blew it. And then the Bills game, Josh Allen had a career game. Like they played out of their minds and the Chiefs still figured out a way to beat them because Mahomes just answer back on the other end. And I would argue Allen played better than Mahomes. So I'm saying this is what it feels like when the Patriots were dominating, right? Because Peyton could go and throw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game, and they'd still lose to the Patriots in the AFC Championship sometimes. Like you could give everything you had, and the Patriots would still, at the end of the day, you'd feel like, geez, like we did all that, and we either barely beat them or they still got us, even when we gave it our absolute best. And that's what I feel about the Chiefs. It just feels like for the rest of Mahomes' career, and, this is my bold take. I mean, it's not even bold, really. I'm sure some people will agree with this, but Brady retired and, he is the GOAT and in the way a lot of people are interpreted, and I'm not going to fight that. But I truly believe that, like, Mahomes is – and this isn't like a bold take, but I truly believe that Mahomes we're going to be talking about as the best quarterback of all time when he retires. And maybe that's not a bold take, but – and I'm not even saying he's going to win as many championships as Brady. To win 7 championships is absurd. We might not never see that again. But just the pace that he's on, in the sense of his output, is statistically speaking, just the way that he feels so dominant this early in his career. I don't think we've ever seen a quarterback this dominant this early in their career, because he's 3 years or 4 years into it and he didn't play his first year. And Brady, Manning, Breeze, Rodgers, 3 of those guys didn't even start their first year. And even the ones that did weren't this good or this early on. So it's crazy to think about.
I just don't know how you can call a team a dynasty when they haven't won multiple championships yet.
Well, because they find their
and they've only made 2 of the Super Bowls though. This is the second time they've lost in the conference championship.
But I look at it in the sense of they've been in the AFC Championship all 4 years. Patrick Mahomes has been a starter, and he's still only 4 years into his career. Whereas we talk about the Patriots being a dynasty, and Brady didn't even take over until 4 years into his career. And Mahomes already has a championship. He already has a Super Bowl MVP. He already has a regular season MVP. And the Chiefs are constantly the team to beat in the AFC. So that's why I think they're a dynasty. But I get your argument.
I see dynasty upside, but one championship is not a dynasty. A dynasty is about winning championships.
Okay, they are the AFC equivalent of, I'll give you that. The closest thing to a dynasty in the NFL there is right now.
And the other challenge I'll give you is that if you say the Chiefs should have won that Bengals game, then the Bills should have won the week before, even more so. If they just squib kick, the game is over. So, but anyway,
fair enough.
That's my other point. So,
I mean, if the Bengals play the Chiefs 10 times, which luckily they don't have to do. I mean, I know they beat them in the regular season, so maybe they just have the Chiefs.
Zach, you are hammering the Bengals disrespect. They beat them both times.
I don't think the Bengals win the division next year. Like I'm telling you, I like the Bengals. I think they've taken advantage of an open AFC North. And I'm not trying to disrespect them in any way, but if you actually think that they're going to get right back to this stage next year with that defense that is very inconsistent, I think with another year, I don't even know if they come out of the AFC North next year, to be honest.
Zach's got the Mason Rudolph-led Steelers, I guess, unless Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers, the Ravens could be better next year.
Let's not forget about the Ravens. What they did with the amount of injuries they had this season is actually unbelievable. I mean, John Harbaugh, for that alone, should be in consideration for Coach of the Year because Lamar was out for like multiple games. They had their entire running back core injured before the season even started. And then across the course of the season, they were losing their best players on defense in and out. Like they might be the most injured team in the NFL this year. Actually, they were the most injured team in the NFL. And they still managed to, win games and almost make the playoffs. So I'm not going to rule out the potential of the Ravens bouncing back because I'm never going to bet against John Harbaugh, especially with Lamar at quarterback, because I think Lamar seems to get disrespected with all the other quarterbacks we talk about, and he's an MVP in his own right. But, I mean, I still think, Zach, you're hating on the Bengals a little too much here, buddy. Like, I'm not going to come out next year being like the Chiefs are my favorite to win the AFC. I'll probably put them top 4 in the AFC next year, not the Chiefs, the Bengals. But I definitely think that they should be the favorites to win the AFC North, and they should be considered a top 3 team in the AFC. I mean, they didn't make the Super Bowl on a whim, and your argument might be, you don't expect it to happen again. But all that's going to happen is those young guys are just going to get another year more like advanced and veteran. And Burrow's already gone past his sophomore year, so I don't expect a sophomore slump. If anything, I expect him to continue to get better. I expect Jamar Chase and him to continue to develop a rapport, and I expect them just continue to add. And if anything, they'll probably lose some money on the Tyler Boyd front or something like that and be able to add on defense, like they have avenues to get better as opposed to getting worse. So I actually think the Bengals are set up for a beautiful future.
Plus they have ownership that refuses to spend money, which will probably never change. And I respect that, but I don't actually respect that. But that's just, if they ever chose to actually spend real money and like acquire some of the big game free agents, like they made a lot of really nice underrated deals this offseason, and like some guys that people don't know as well. But if they ever decide to spend money, then, they're going to be a problem. But I just love Zach like doubling down and then tripling down disrespect of the Bengals after apologizing for disrespecting the Bengals at the top of the episode.
It's definitely a hold my beer type of moment. But actually, someone I feel bad for is AJ Green. The guy spent his entire career in Cincinnati. True. And then he gets traded, and then this team just goes straight to the Super Bowl. Man, I if I had a beer with me, I would pour one out right now just for the guy.
Hey, you can't.
That sucks for AJ Green too, because he's genuinely one of the greatest receivers of our generation, and maybe he won't be remembered as much that way from people outside of ourselves who watched him. But he is like right there with Julio in the sense of what they accomplished for the first. As a matter of fact, in their first 5 years, I think a lot of people picked AJ Green as the better receiver because
he was drafted above Julio actually,
and he performed like that. Like he was the number one with the Bengals, and he really, he made Andy Dalton in that offense way more relevant with his performance. So I do feel for him because he was one of those guys that I think at least deserved a shot to get further They always would lose in like the first round when Vontrex's perfect would get like a 70 yards of penalties and they'd lose by like a field goal to like the Steelers or the Ravens. I always felt so bad for like Green and guys like that. But that was a really good point, Zach. I hadn't thought about that.
And like it is crazy to think, like I'm looking at the preseason odds here. Like after last year's Super Bowl, they were 80-1 to I guess either win or make the Super Bowl the next year. Same odds were Jets, Lions, Texans. So they were on that conversation.
Wow.
Isn't that wild? And then that was reasonable though. They won like 4 games the year before, and Joe Burrow had just torn his ACL.
Yeah, but that's my point. They won 4 games because Joe Burrow had torn his ACL. They were giving people a run for their money last year, even with Burrow.
Yeah,
but
that is a great point, Zach. Like William Jackson, who went to Washington, is another one. Like after he left, he was like, bad mouthing the Bengals and whatnot, and then he goes out. He has a terrible year in Washington this year, and then they're all three, like you said, all three of their corners, Eli Apple, like Mike Hilton, they've all stepped up and played really well. So it's just crazy. But on to the next game.
San Francisco game. That game was incredible from what I saw based on. So the person that was sitting in front of me on the flight from Charlotte to Austin, he had the game. He had the game on. It was like iPhone and whatnot. So I was kind of like creepily looking through like multiple seats and catching some of the games. So I was able to watch most of it until thank God the guy didn't look back. But if he's listening to this podcast, I appreciate it. Thanks, man. Honestly, incredible game. I'm not sure if you guys have been following like the 49ers entrances where they come blowing out of the doors and they have like the one guy has like his boombox and Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel are leading the pack, dancing and stuff like that. And that is a scary team to play. I mean, the Bengals have had their Cinderella story, but so have the 49ers in their own respects. And, great season for Shanahan and company. Obviously fell a little bit short there in SoFi Stadium, but it was close. And Ev, to your point, you had mentioned these great teams blowing games with, offensive engineers and stuff like that, like Andy Reid and Shanahan. They were up 17-7. And they let kind of like the wheels of the bus fall out there in the fourth quarter. But so I'll kick it over to you. What do you think, man, and how did everything go?
I mean, I like it's like I said, I always thought the Rams were the best team, but this is why I have so much respect for. This is why I have so much respect for the 49ers, and this is why, as a Colts fan, it like hurts my heart sometimes to watch a team like the 49ers have that kind of success and get to the point that they got to, because that's what we could have or should have been, right? Like with the way, you talk about having those playmakers, the same way that I would hope that a team with like Jonathan Taylor, Quentin Nelson, DeForest Buckner, and Darius Leonard to play is what the 49ers actually did. Like they came in as that dark horse and they did what they could achieve, and they almost made it to the Super Bowl doing that. And this is what we talked about midway through the season, where I said, well, after the 49ers beat the Rams in the regular season, I said, like, is this team not much different than the team that made the Super Bowl a few years ago and almost beat the Chiefs? And with the exception of a couple losses, maybe 1 or 2 losses on the defensive front, I would almost argue their offense was better. Not almost. Their offense was definitely better this year, and their defense was still great. So that's why I'm so impressed with the 49ers, because the Rams have way more talent, if you think of it in the sense of like across the positions. But the Niners almost beat them by literally just playing hard-nosed, run the like ball down your throat football, and then get the best player of the ball on offense in Deebo, and then, do your absolute best to sustain your defense in the sense of, not allowing touchdowns and keeping the team at bay. And they play such impressive football because they don't – that's one thing I got so much respect for Shanahan. He doesn't change like his mentality going into games. The only thing is I wish he changed his mentality when he was up, right? Like I wish he would either stick to what he was doing or stop trying to improvise so much when he has leads, because that seems to be his biggest issue. He'll get leads and then he'll be really struggle to keep those leads because of what I was talking about earlier. But I'm not surprised by the outcome, because I still think as you watch a game, like the Rams are just more talented, and that's what it came down to, that you couldn't stop them any longer, and Jimmy Garoppolo just isn't the answer in offense, in my opinion. Like that's really the takeaway for me, because I really think that if they can get Trey Lance going in the offseason and they can get him to be a little bit more than just a game manager, that team's going to be scary next year. My biggest qualm is Jimmy Garoppolo. When the cards were on the line, he absolutely struggled. And the Rams basically just said, we're going to stop the run game with our ridiculous defensive line, and we're going to force Jimmy to take advantage. And, they got the 17 points, but there was, after that, he couldn't do anything. Like, and that was always my concern with them. And the Rams are too talented, and they came back. I mean, Cooper Kupp is ridiculous. We can talk about the Rams all we want, but I want to take a second real quick and give my boy Deebo Samuel the biggest of shout outs, because he had a historic season. He did everything he could to make that team relevant and then some. I always thought when he was in South Carolina as a Gamecock, like he would do us proud, but I never realized that he would get to this level where I legitimately believe that he was a top 3 to 5 offensive player in the NFL this year. And I'm really sad to see him not get that opportunity to go to Super Bowl and try to win again, especially with him playing the way that he has. But I'm so excited for his future and what he accomplished. And that moment at the end where Odell walked over to him and gave him a hug, and all the guys from the Rams were going to show him love, clearly proves the kind of season he had. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. I'll let you guys touch on the game for the rest of it, because I think the Rams did what I expected them to do eventually.
Well, we wouldn't have it any other way, Si. You mentioned Deebo Samuel every week for the past 10 weeks. So, but that moment with Odell was cool. But yeah, I think this is a game the Rams should have won. They did win, given all the talent and all they put into this year. They won. Shout out Matthew Stafford, played well again. 49ers had their chance. They dropped an interception as well. That really would have changed the game, but it just wasn't quite enough late. Jimmy G actually played pretty well in this one, I thought. I mean, he misses, he's Jimmy G. He's going to miss his throws and whatnot, but I actually thought he played pretty well. But to Si's point, he just kind of limits the upside of their offense, which is tough. And the thing about Kyle Shanahan, it's like theoretically he shouldn't have to change anything when they're up big because of the way they run the football. Like, yeah, they have a more creative play calling style in terms of how they run the ball, but it's usually run the ball, high percentage throws that shouldn't really have to change when you're ahead. Now, to Si's point, like the Rams, they keyed in on and stopped the run and forced Jimmy to beat them, and he wasn't able to do it. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I always thought this team wasn't quite as good as the Super Bowl team, specifically on the defensive side. They were proving me wrong there for a while, but I just didn't quite have enough. And then, yeah, I mean, Jimmy, it's tough because I don't think Trey Lance is very good, is the sense I'm getting from 49ers camp, which I think makes it a hard decision for them because the players really like Jimmy and they rally behind him. And if Trey Lance was good, we would have been hearing more buzz about him, similar to how we were with Patrick Mahomes. Before they traded Alex Smith, you heard a lot of NFL insiders dude, and from the coaches and stuff, this guy's legit, but you don't hear that about Trey Lance. So no, I still think they need to try, given that, they've taken a few cracks at it and clearly Jimmy's not the guy. So, but I don't know. It certainly adds a little bit of variability into what we could expect from them moving forward. But yeah, I think the Rams, they took care of business. They got it done late. And I think they're a more talented team. They, probably deserve to win the game. They should have won the game. They did win the game. So.
Well, make no mistake about it. The reason that the 49ers lost is they didn't have another similar play call where Trent Williams lined up as the off tight end in motion just to go destroy a hole and just open it up for Elijah Mitchell. I'm not sure if you guys saw that. And I believe it was the Packers game when he literally just mowed through 3 people, including one of his own teammates, and opened one of the largest holes that I've seen in a long time in football this year. So, hats off to him. Great season for the 49ers. The Rams, in my opinion, were the better team there. And I do think that maybe transitions up perfectly for the Bengals-Rams game here, which is actually back in SoFi Stadium. So a little bit of a home game for the Rams, but it really hasn't been that way. There's been a lot of away teams that have traveled. It's been kind of a 50-50, 60-40 thing. So you definitely know those Bengals people are going to travel.
Yeah, no, I would not be surprised if there was, almost as many Bengals fans as there are Rams fans for that game, because it's a bigger deal for Bengals fans. They love their football, and they don't get how many opportunities have they had in history to really have their team be relevant enough to even be close to that? And they love their football. People in Cincinnati love their football. So it would not surprise me. But that's what's so embarrassing to me about the Rams fans, because it's they give you everything you could want in the sense of a team. Ever since they moved over there, they've really done everything they can to rebuild to be this team that you should be able to get behind. And that Hollywood mentality, I'm not going to say that's the case with all the fans, but just a number of Hollywood personalities that were at the game. It was more some like UFC event where people were like going to be like, yo, like show face, than it was like a real gritty football game where the fans are there like howling and cackling and excited and rooting for the team to really take it. And that sucks for the players. Like, I know we give Matt Stafford's wife some crap for being so outspoken about it, but when I watched last week's game, I agree with that though, because I get that the 49ers are also in the realm of LA to where they could travel, but it's embarrassing when a team comes into your stadium and has as many, if not more fans than you in a championship game. And now they're going into the Super Bowl and they get to be at home, which would be a huge advantage to them. But this better not be a situation where like there's more Bengals fans than Rams fans, because that's just like you're disrespecting your players and your organization. You shouldn't even really be able to call yourself a fan if you're like, or like as a fan base, you shouldn't be able to call yourself a good fan base if you're allowing that to happen. Like that's just so ridiculous to me.
The trick about the Super Bowl, though, it's like the tickets largely are purchased and given out well in advance. So it's like even harder to have a home field advantage, like unless you're buying on resale. And the whole point about it's like the LA, like I was saying, like the culture of the people, they're not really football people. And like the Rams just got there. So it's like, there's not that historical element to it. So it's like, now granted, there is also, that it's the Super Bowl. So maybe LA people have, will want to go for that factor up. But the Super Bowl, like I'm trying to remember from the Bucks last year, but like, I mean, I would imagine like the home field advantage wasn't quite as significant as like just a normal home game or like the AFC Championship game that they had the week before. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, the Bengals fans definitely deserve this a lot more. But there's also like, the Rams have such a large group of players that are very deserving. Obviously, Stafford being the most notable, but like Aaron Donald and Kupp to an extent, obviously. So we'll see. I think the Rams players are a little more kind of in line to get theirs at this point, but the Bengals fans are, certainly more deserving on the spectator side. So we'll see. It should be interesting. It will be interesting to see how the crowd dynamic shakes out, though.
And one thing I was going to say is with the Rams team, this is what I said to Patrick and Mr. B when I was watching it. Like, you're talking Von Miller's already got one. We're talking Odell Beckham Jr., Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford, and Jalen Ramsey. 5 players.
Weddle doesn't have one either. He just came back, but he's,
6 to 7 players that have been, like at one point or another, an iconic player at their respective positions of this generation. So a lot of big name players that probably deserve to be champions would be champions if the Rams win. So that's, in a way, it's like obviously not in a way, obviously the Bengals are the underdogs being the younger team, but I'm probably one of the few people that as an unbiased party is rooting for the Rams, because there's just so many players on that team that I really want to retire with the Super Bowl, like Stafford being the number one guy, being in a position, and Donald right there next to him, who has just been like, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but I think he should be a Hall of Famer with a championship. And I feel the same about Stafford. And then you guys know how much I love Odell and Ramsey and guys like that. So I just think there's so many players that are deserving of a championship that are on that team. And that's why I really, 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 I think the Bengals will have their time, but I think for a lot of these guys, they might not get this opportunity again. So we don't know, but so I want them to get that dub for that reason. So that's my perspective.
It's a good point. That's what makes the Super Bowl really interesting, is there are a plethora of players on both teams that really haven't been to the Super Bowl before. This is really their first opportunity. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how both of these teams play out. For me specifically, I'm going to go inside with the veteran presence in these type of situations, I think the Bengals are going to come out hot. I think they're definitely going to score. I think it's going to be higher scoring than people are alluding to, but for me specifically, I really do think the Rams are going to come up and kind of control this game. And that defense is super intimidating. And for a guy like Joe Burrow that got sacked, 10, 11 times against the Titans and really has no offensive front, I know he is going to be severely worried about Aaron Donald himself, because that guy is going to eat in the Super Bowl. And I would be concerned about that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's 10 plus sacks and it's just it just goes LA's way the entire game.
You think Joe Burrow is going to be intimidated? Have you seen that guy play for a minute this year, man? That guy ain't scared of anything, dude. He handles the pressure better than anyone. I do think it's tough.
That's because he's never gotten hit by Aaron Donald before.
The Titans sacked him like 9 times in that game. I do think it's a tough matchup for them with exactly what you mentioned. But man, Joe Burrow will not be intimidated by this moment, even with Aaron Donald in his face.
Taking shots to the chin from Von Miller and Aaron Donald, play after play after play, and he's going to get back up and say, give me some more. Like that's the kind of player that Joe Burrow is. And do you understand how absurd the storyline would be though? Like this is why I love the Super Bowl so much, because I'm going to be so happy regardless of which team wins, because I think there's just so many players that are easy to root for. But do you realize the storylines that would pop up if we had like the two like side-by-side pictures of Joe Burrow winning the Heisman, winning the college football championship, with that cigar, with that like iconic picture of him puffing that cigar. And then literally like 3 or 4 years later in Cincinnati, like near where his home was, him winning a Super Bowl championship and being the Super Bowl MVP, like recreating that image within like a 3-year span of each other. Like, that is, I don't think we'll ever see that again. Like that is so extremely rare that anybody would be able to do that in the course of a 20-year career, but to do it in such a short span and with the story of having to transfer to LSU and do all that, be a number 1 overall pick, do all that and then go win a Super Bowl. It's like that is GOAT stuff. Like you just don't see that. That's where legends are. He's already a legend for getting here, but like that, the storylines behind that it almost gives me chills to think about. Like somebody that young, the dude's like 22 or 23. Yeah. Like, let's not forget that. It's absurd.
Yeah, he kind of came out of nowhere, like you said, in college. It's like I feel like I didn't know much about him until he started ripping people up in the SEC there his last season. But yeah, he's gonna have some up his sleeve if he wins, man. There's gonna be a classic photo there. I mean, just this week, what he said in his presser, I make too much money for these diamonds to be fake. This is chain. It's like, man, I love that guy. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll save a more in-depth preview for next week. Given we're at about an hour here and we got a week off this week. But I don't know. What else you guys got for this week?
I will say Joe Burrow's dad threw $100 on him or maybe I think it might have been $1,000 for him to win the Heisman the year he transferred to LSU and was pretty, serious that he was going to get the starting job. And it was 2,000 to 1 odds. So he won his dad some money there too. But yeah, good for the kid. And I'm not sure if we should dive too much into our predictions because we'll probably be meeting next week to kind of discuss them. But overall, the lines have already been set. Currently, it's 4. It started out at 3.5 or maybe 4, and now the line's at 4.5, at least on FanDuel. So not really sure which way this is going to go. I figure it'll probably edge closer to 4.55 by the end of it. But overall, really excited for the Super Bowl. And I mean, maybe the last thing to talk about is OBJ has been playing his ass off too. Yes. And, he had like over 120 receiving yards, and he's just been a really, really good right-hand man for Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's eating still. He's still getting his 100 yards and whatnot. He's getting a variety of touchdowns. But OBJ converted a lot of crucial third down plays. And it's just really interesting to see him have a veteran quarterback like Stafford throw to him and kind of see the resurgence of his career too.
Yeah, this fully continues to prove the point of me just feeling like the Browns did him dirty. Like I know a lot of people say like it was both ways, but I think it was way more the Browns doing him dirty than him doing them dirty because he's never had anybody that could really get on the ball with consistency. And even later in his career, when he's out of his prime as a number 2 on the Rams, that's the kind of stuff he's doing in a big time game and that he's been doing since he's got to the Rams as a matter of fact, he established that rapport real quick. Like Odell deserves. I'm so glad you said that, Zach. I am so glad you brought that up.
Shout out Bobby Trees as well, another guy that deserves a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, won't be able to play, but Robert Woods, who Odell obviously his role expanded once simultaneously. Basically, Woods went down, but shame he can't be playing in the game. But it'd be well deserved for him to get a ring as well, despite the fact that he missed most of the year. So.
100%. I think one thing to point to is that our next episode might be a little something different, a little something special. We won't say anything right now, but I'm very, very, very much looking forward to what we might be potentially putting out there for our next episode and what the views might be and what the conversation might be and what our predictions might be. And expect a very heavy betting episode in the sense of what we talk about, because that's where my mind's going to be on Super Bowl weekend. So You might not see us early next week, but you'll definitely be seeing us pretty soon after. Looking forward to Super Bowl, boys. Any last words from any of y'all before we jump off before our Super Bowl edition?
Hail to the Commanders.
HTTC, baby. HTTC, Ev. I will say I'm very excited for this Jamar Chase, Jalen Ramsey matchup. Very excited about that. They haven't played each other this season. Justin Jefferson got his crack against Ramsey, and Ramsey did not take too kindly to these LSU superstar studs that are, very fresh, in the wide receiver position in the NFL. Jalen, was talking a ton of smack. Oh, also Robbie Gould talking some smack to Jalen Ramsey out here. This is now his third game in the playoffs. Just warming up. The Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were walking by one time. He's just hammering field goals and missing them by, a couple feet. He's doing it in front of, the Green Bay Packers as during their warm-ups. Then he also did the same thing with the Rams, and they obviously didn't take it too kindly. Robbie Gould is a veteran, just becoming the villain out here. Also, like a small shout out I kind of noticed there. So, unfortunately, he won't be able to play on Super Bowl Sunday, but I think we're all excited for the game.
Hey, man, athletes, he's got to get his reps in, man. If you're in my way, that's not my problem. It's not my problem. But
if one thing's been proven this playoffs, kickers are athletes too, baby. Kickers are athletes too.
Pat McAfee guy up there at the top left. But, we'll have to – the Ramsey one is interesting. We'll talk about it more next week. But it'll be interesting how they approach that matchup if they do just have him shadow him, which I would expect they do. But you also have T. Higgins out there and a lot of different weapons. So a bunch of different ways to go around it. But we can deep dive the game a little more next week. Like Sai said, talk about some fun prop bets, some parlays, what we're planning from a betting strategery perspective for the game. Probably come out Saturday, Sunday morning, maybe. So you have a little bit of time to watch it before the game. But yeah, I think that's it for this week. Appreciate you guys watching as always. That was Mondays Down South.
Mondays Down South.
Yeah, we winning by a landslide. Never see me coming, I'm a landmine. Yeah, I ain't taking orders in command like. Yeah, you about to see me on demand like. On demand. If you ain't know, you about to understand. Yeah, I got the team by my side, right hand. Yeah, take it to a string.